Hi, my name is Megan, and let's talk books. Today we're going to be talking about a book called Alchemised. It's a dark romantasy novel written by the author called SenLinYu. I'm going to start by talking about the Harry Potter of it all. It was originally before it was published, it was a fan fiction written by this author, posted on AO3 Archive of Our Own. It's like a fan fiction website where writers of all ages and all kinds can post their work for free, and it's usually revolving around some fandom that already exists, which characters that already exist. They're just putting them in different worlds or different situations or creating a different ending because they didn't like the one that was already created. This fanfiction was called Manacled, and it was about the characters from Harry Potter, Hermione, and Draco. It was a sort of spin-off into the universe if, say, Voldemort did win the war at the end, and then what would happen after that, and then how the characters Hermione and Draco would develop a relationship out of that. Now, I think I'm a very few population of people that have read this book so far, and that I have not read Manacled. I really didn't know anything about it. I have a few friends who've read it. I have a friend specifically that recommended me to read Alchemized because they loved Manacled so much, and then they read Alchemized and they loved that as well. And I'm a big fantasy reader. I love fantasy. I especially love romantasy, Court of Thorns and Roses, and anything basically by Sarah J. Maas is pretty much my forte. And I was trying to get back into reading, so I thought this would be a great book, even though it is 1,000 pages. But I chewed through it. It was very different, and I think that it's hard for the people who have already read Manacled and feel so attached to that story to sort of separate the story, that main story between Draco and Hermione and then the whole Harry Potter universe of it all, from this new and original work that sort of was based off of that fanfiction. Now, yes, J.K. Rowling, horrible person, bad person, do not support anything that she says or does. I really am not even that big of a fan of Harry Potter. I obviously am on fanfiction, like I know what goes on, I'm into fandoms, but I was never really into the Harry Potter fandom. I know about the Marauders, and I know about the Draco and Hermione ship, which is one of the most popular. But I never really read or divulged myself into any of that sort of content, I guess until now. Although I do have the opinion, which I am not a professional reviewer. I don't have any sort of certifications to be reviewing a book, even because I have no experience in writing. I just enjoy reading. But I think that I don't like when people have said that it is, these bookstores are advertising it as a Harry Potter book. I understand that it was created from that world and inspired by that world, really, by this different author, but Alchemized is totally different. I mean, I only read, I think, to Prisoner of Azkaban. Prisoner. I mean, I didn't really love the world. I didn't really get involved other than that. But I think this is its own world. It has its own magic system. These characters, you can sort of relate back to them, but I think it's totally different, at least from what I know. And that's because Alchemized is about the war between these two groups of people, one of which who values good. I mean, even though no two sides are good, really, in this story, which I think the author really did a good job of portraying in the actions of each side. Like, each side has vital things that they're fighting for, and I think each of them, even though one is probably just a little worse than the other, I think they both have some sort of ground to stand on when it comes to fighting for their side. We have one side that's the necromancers, led by Moro, who is a necromancer and has found the key to immortality in this world. And we have the other side of the alchemists, who are, they mainly use resonance in metals and non-living things, and they don't like how people can manipulate the living and manipulate the dead. And on this side also, we have our main character named Helena, and she is a vivimancer, which is a separate type of alchemist from the normal kind of this world. And Palladia? I'll never know. She has vivimancy, which means that she can manipulate the living, and which also means she has a chance to manipulate the dead. But in this society under the Eternal Flame, they have made it sort of unethical to even have the ability to manipulate the living. Like, she's a healer, so she heals, she cleans wounds, she heals them for the war, but even then they treat her as if she is this other being that needs to earn her right to be there. And part of that is the toll, which is as a Vivimancer in this society, you give so much of your gift as a part of being born a Vivimancer because it's such a sin that you eventually get taken by the toll, which is your sacrifice, meaning you die earlier because you've used your gift so much. And it's sort of this battle between the side of the living and the side of the dead, kind of, except the side of the living is this weird religious, cultish, odd society, and then the other side is also this weird, immortal, believing, weird society. It's just weird all around, and I really liked that. All right, now I'm going to talk about the things that I really liked in this book. I ate it up, I gotta tell you. I love angst, and I love angst when it's combined with a fantasy context, and I love romance, and when all of that is combined, it's really just the perfect concoction for me to just absolutely devour. I really felt like I was living through Helena's eyes throughout this entire story, which I'm a fan of third person writing, and I do like the POV shifts every now and then in a book, but I really did like that this one was just Helena the entire time, because we, as the audience, we are seeing the world through her eyes, because she wakes up in this instance where she doesn't remember the last 19 months, and so we're kind of learning the last 19 months as she is, and then eventually when we get to part 2, which completely details the last 19 months, we feel even more attached as a reader. I think the writing in this was also pretty spectacular, and I will say, I hate to say this, especially for a fanfiction writer, I believe that fanfiction writers are one of the, if not the best coalition of writers ever. I think there are definitely people like Brandon Sanderson and Sarah J. Maas and all these other great authors that write these published works, but there are all these other people who maybe can't afford to get their works looked at, or they really just like this one thing, so they want to write all these intricate, different, canonized stories that follow these characters that they fall in love with. And it's always the best writers who are like, oh, I was in the hospital, but I got this chapter written out, and it's like the most tear-jerking, best possible thing you've ever read. And I think her writing really emulates, and I'm proud of it because I am a fan fiction consumer, I think her writing really emulates that fanfiction writers are real writers and they can become published authors, especially when they take their work and something they've inspired by and then change it and add their own tune to it. And I just really loved her writing. It was deliciously descriptive in a lot of the words she used to describe things. I think in one instance she talked about Helena feeling like reaching her memories was like trying to grab the wind and how it slips out of your fingers. I think descriptive imagery like that is just so wonderful, and I wished it was used in so many more books, especially these big fantastical books where we are talking about worlds that we may not be familiar with. I also really loved the plot and the story between the two main characters, which is Kane and Helena. I think this book is about war, and I think it's about women's sacrifices and positions in war, especially in a male-dominated field. And I think the author really capitalizes on that well in showing how much Helena is sacrificing for herself, but as to everyone else, that's what is expected of her, and she's not even appreciated for it. And I think it speaks a lot to how women were perceived, especially when we think back to World War II, and then women started being turned into nurses and everything, started joining the workforce, sort of replacing those jobs for men. And back then, when men were doing it, I think nursing was a lot more recognized and a lot more honorable, but now nursing just seems to be a woman's job. And I think it really capitalizes and emphasizes on the relationship between women and war, and then their place in it. And I know this book was inspired by the war of the Harry Potter universe, and also The Handmaid's Tale. I've heard that the original Manacled has a lot more pull from The Handmaid's Tale than this one does, and I can even see it in Alchemised, especially with the pregnancy program of it all, and the women are basically used as livestock, especially in, both sides really, but it is a little bit more obvious in the necromancer side of how when the war is over and then Helena's put into this program. I think it was a really great feminist war novel, and I know there's so many people online that don't agree, and they think that it is an anti-feminist novel, and I have to respectfully disagree. I don't think I'm the most educated person out there, but I think it hit home for me in a lot of things that we're experiencing in real life. and a lot of things that are going on now, and how women are being treated, and how... Oh, that was my cat. Do you want to say hi to the people? Very good. What was I saying? War feminist novel. I think it was great. I think it also showed the relationship between Cain and Helena, that it is this sort of thing that was... It brew from the war. I mean, she was literally sold to him because she is, again, treated like cattle and livestock. I think it's not the representation of a healthy relationship. And I think that is the point. I think it is... This book shows how far and what people will do for war and for each other. I think that these two characters, when placed in this predicament with the experiences they've had in their life, shows how love can be toxic and it can be cruel, especially when placed in this environment. But I think it says so much about how much they are willing to go for each other. They literally are the only reasons that they are alive, because they want to be there with each other. So I really enjoyed all of those aspects. I think there are more aspects that I enjoyed than I think I didn't enjoy. And speaking about what I didn't enjoy, the few critiques I have, I think it was a bit lore dumpy. And I had this problem with Fourth Wing as well. I know everyone loves Fourth Wing. I'm not a big fan of Fourth Wing. I love the premise. I think the premise is really great. I think it's really unique. I think it's really fresh, especially in this world of fantasy, where a lot of the times, because of Sarah J. Maas's sort of explosion into the area, that we focused on Fae and a lot of these specific type of mystical creatures like vampires, werewolves, Fae. That was sort of all we really delved into. And I think dragons was a great addition, but again, Rebecca Yarros had this issue that I do not particularly like in writing, is that we were told all of this information and not shown. And I think it's really hard, especially when you're following along with the main character and they already know everything about the world. It's a little bit of a tactic, I think, to create a character that knows nothing about the world and then place them in. And I think that was a lot of that was used well in, for example, A Court of Thorn and Roses, where Feyre didn't really know a lot about the mortal realm, or the fairy realm. Sorry, she knew a lot about the mortal realm, obviously. But I think that I don't know how to fix this. Listen, but I know I get really I just zone out when I get a lot of lore dumpy info. I think all of it was good info. I think it explained the world very well, but I think it's hard. I think it's hard to place it in specific moments and not give you too much. I think although it was lore dumpy, I think it was pretty sporadically spread well. So especially with part 2, we were learning as we were seeing. We were experiencing these in real time as Helena was, and hearing her thoughts. And then in those thoughts, we would get just snippets of lore about the continuing to build the world. But I think especially in the beginning, when I think it was like the first 2 pages, when Helena was still in the tank and she was thinking about all these things, it was like, oh, sudden lore dump into the world. These are all the things you need to know. And those are stuff that I don't really enjoy in books. Listen, I will sit there and I will try to retain much of it as I can, but it sometimes just goes in one ear, out the other. I keep trucking though, and eventually I get it. I understand what's going on, but that was one thing that I have a critique about, and I think it's a common theme throughout a lot of fantasy novels, and I think it's just something that everyone's trying to learn how to jump over the hurdle of. My next critique, which I think has to do a lot with Manacled and the fact that those are based on built-out characters, was that I did not feel any sort of connection to any of the Eternal Flame characters, specifically Luke, Soren, and Lila, the main friend group of Helena. The whole book, she's talking about how she loves them so much, especially Luke, like he's so good, but we don't really see any representation of that goodness from him. Like we don't have any sort of... we as readers don't have any sort of background to base off our feelings on them. So it was really hard for me to watch the things Helena was doing, especially in part 2, for these people, and not feeling any sort of want to do these things for these people myself. Like I think the scenes we got with Luke were good. I think the scenes we got with Lila were good. I think Soren was like not mentioned at all until like when he died. Spoiler. And I think it's really sad, because I would have really liked to become attached to these characters as much as I became attached to Cain from the very beginning. And I think it's also hard because of the way the book is laid out. It's a present, past, and then sort of present and future. And I think the book is laid out in a very smart and interesting way that I have never seen a book laid out before, and that's, I think, a big pull from all the audiences and why it's so loved. But I think the lack of background and real-time experiences with these three characters really lacked in me feeling about them and the Eternal Flame in general. And I know like caring about the Eternal Flame isn't something that I don't think any audience member would do. I think it is a very obvious fault in Helena's line of thinking that is not her fault necessarily. It's what she grew up with. She is an immigrant, I think, is also another other thing. We're getting off topic of dislikes, but I'm just going to keep going. I think this book is also a great point of view into immigrants and being relocated or moving to this place where they think they're going to get better treatment or whatever, and then they get there, and they, even though they were like Helena's dad, he was a top surgeon, a medical brilliant. He was a medical brilliant back in his home country of Etrus, I think it was, where all these people had dark skin, dark curly hair, and then you bring them to this land of Palad. I'm never gonna get the name right. You bring them to this land where the Eternal Flame is operating, and you see people with very paler skin and golden hair and, whatever, and then they are, because also they add on that they are vivimancers, it's added on to this extra sort of bit of oppression and separation from these better people that live in Palladia. And I think it says something about today. And I think it is a true immigrant experience that Helen is going through, because she is made to believe that she is doing wrong, and she even for existing, she's being wrong, and she needs to do all these things to make up for it in order to win a spot in the eternal life of after when you die. I think all of these things would have been even more powerful if I felt like I cared about Luke and Soren and Lila. I think at the end, because we get those few more chapters with Lila, I especially felt a lot more connected to her and her story. But Luke and Soren, I guess until Luke was dying and when Soren was dying, that was the only time where I felt like these were people worth fighting for, at least from my eyes. And I haven't been brainwashed. I come into this being like, oh, this is weird. And Helena thinks nothing of it because she's grown up in this. So I think a little bit more of backstory with them would have really helped solidify my love for them, and then making these decisions that Helen had to make a little bit more powerful to me, a little bit more pulling words. But yeah, those were my main critiques. There weren't even really any other ones. I think it's beautifully written. I think it's very compelling. I had a really great time reading it. I consumed it all within the span of 2 or 3 days, which was really bad when you're a full-time college student and you need to do homework. But we ball. I think this might be the biggest release of 2025 so far. This is the only one that I've been out of the book sphere for a while, just because of life. But I haven't heard any more whisperings about anything bigger. I don't think Iron Flame came out this year. That was the only one where I was like, that might be it. But I think this might be it because of also all the controversy surrounding it, which I think is I think it's fair, but I also think it's a little stupid, because this is an entirely separate work. Artists in general get inspired by different artists and different literature. Same thing with writers. Like it's just happens. Like you can create a completely original thing, but still be inspired by other works. And that doesn't say, I'm sure SenLinYu has talked about how they do not support J.K. Rowling. I don't think any sane person in the literature world does, that is reading romantasy or fantasy or anything applying to that. And I think it's sort of unfair that this sort of thing that they did not do, they did not cause, is being pushed as a reason to not read the book, because I think the book has a lot to say about things that are happening in the real world to these kinds of people. And I think it calls out a lot of behaviors that exist in real life and could exist. Like, these wars could happen. Not the fantasy part of it, but I mean like the politicized reasoning behind these wars of targeting specific minorities or, religious differences. I think all of these things are very real and very possible. And I think that this book really does a great job in approaching that in a way that is palatable, but also engaging, and really sends a message home of a lot of things are corrupt. And a lot of women and people of color are being taken advantage of. And I think it's just a lot deeper than one may think when they open up a book and expect to hear a Hermione fanfic. Overall, I really like the book. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think if those little critiques were fixed, then I think I would give it a 5 out of 5. But I really loved this book. It's definitely going in one of my favorites as far as the romantasy category. If you wouldn't mind leaving a like, subscribing, perhaps leaving a comment, telling me what I should read, or tell me your own opinion about the book. I'm open to any sort of disagreement, discussion. I think the great thing about literature and about art is that there are many people who think different things about it and have different experiences and different opinions that they want to express. And I think it's an ongoing conversation, literature, art, whatever. And that's why I think I love art and literature so much. So I'm open to anything. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for listening. If you listen this far, I apologize if this was a bit ranty. I feel very passionate and I kind of get off track a little bit, but I feel like all my points were put out there. Thank you. Okay, bye.